Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Jonathan Alexander with the Los Angeles Review of Books, and this is Writing Sex. I'm here today with Myriam Gurba, who is an author most recently of Mean by Coffee House Press in 2017, which I believe was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Book Award, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. And she's also the author of Painting Their Portraits in Winter, Stories, and Delia Season, Stories and a Novella, both of those latter two from Manic Depress. Myriam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm happy to. As I said, I'm a huge fan of Mean, which I think is a wonderful book, a complicated book in a lot of ways, and one that really does not pull any punches when it comes to talking about issues, in particular of sexual violence. Can you say a little bit about what led you to write this book?
Yeah, I wrote Mean over the course of maybe like 5 or 6 years, and it developed as a response to storytelling modes and storytelling habits that didn't resonate with me and that I found bothersome. And what I mean by that is that I had seen like a certain style developing that writers were deploying in order to discuss sexual assault. That a lot of sexual assault narratives, in particular those written by white women, were written in like these very sort of like sacral tones and reverential tones, very staid pedestrian tones, and there was not an invitation to indulge in like humor or playfulness or profanity or bitchiness. Like there's this sort of reverential language reserved for a discussion of what is like a horrifying event that I don't think ought to be spoken about or shouldn't have to be spoken about in like a reverential tone. And so I started to experiment with, I suppose, what one might call like camp, like a campy way of writing about sexual violence. And camp is considered by many to be inherently tacky, but what's more disgusting than sexual assault? So to me, it seemed that like camp was a perfect vehicle for a perfect stylistic vehicle for writing about sexual violence.
Oh, it's fascinating. I really appreciate your mode here and the way in which you want to kind of maybe shift some of the discourses around sexual violence, but then also show up for critique some of the ways in which we've talked about sexual violence as a culture. I can think of any number of books. For instance, I had read a few years ago Alice Sebold's Lucky, which is in many ways a powerful, powerful book, but perhaps does precisely what you're talking about. It is a kind of reverential tone. And while I'm sure we want to honor the various experiences and articulations of different people, I will say there's something really, the word that comes to mind, engaging about your narrative. And I mean engaging in that it opens up possibilities for critique and understanding at whole other levels. Let me give you an example. This is from Mean, one of my favorite passages. You write, "If molestation is a circle of life, then isn't the hand of every molester working through the hand of every other molester? It's fair to say that Mr. Osmond's hand was working through Macaulay's hand, just like the Eucharist is no longer bread during Mass. It's Jesus coming at you through a cracker." And it's funny. It is. And horrifying.
But it's funny.
It's horrifying and funny all at the same time. And I think that, for those of us who have dealt with sexual violence in our own lives, there's something very resonant there about the pain, but then also the needing to take a step back. I mean, and the laughter is not just a sort of putting up of a distance. There's also a critique of religion.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, So I was raised in a Catholic household, and it was like an odd sort of Catholic household because my parents were what I would call buffet Catholics, in the sense that they would take the parts of Catholicism they wanted and then leave the Brussels sprouts. Do you know what I mean? It was just sort of like, we'll take what suits us, and then we're going to pretend that the parts that don't suit us don't exist. And so I was raised with religion, but in this very sort of piecemeal manner, where like religion was, I was raised to believe that like religion was supposed to convenience me, that I didn't exist to sort of convenience God. So, and so when I got to high school and attended Catholic school, I couldn't really continue to like engage in that buffet style approach, because this sort of oppressive Catholicism structured my entire day.
Yeah.
And so that was when I really woke up to like the importance of critique, I suppose, like as a parochial student, and started to really contemplate the hypocrisies that were unfolding in front of my face. I was writing about this yesterday in an essay regarding high school and my high school experiences, that it was horrifyingly amazing to be a queer kid, a queer teen, who attends a parochial school where she is told that she's going to burn in hell for who she is by closeted queers who are going to indoctrinate her into homophobia and then go home to their same-sex living quarters. And so thinking about that hypocrisy and trying to find the humor in that hypocrisy began really early for me, because I had to find, or I had to develop sort of survival techniques as a queer kid experiencing parochial school. And so I tended to congregate with other girls who were queer or marginalized in various ways. And we really, really, really sharpened our critical skills as like a group of smart, bitchy girls. You know, that's what we would do. We would just sit together and kind of sharpen the knives verbally for fun.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And for all of that, there's still poignant moments, painful passages in this book.
yeah.
One that has stuck with me is when a boy sitting next to the narrator is sort of fingering her underneath the desk, and the narrator sees the teacher seeing the scene. And
Yeah.
that's powerful and disturbing.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly disturbing. And I mean, that character was me, and that experience happened. And for me, that was sort of my Wizard of Oz moment. And I was 12 years old. That was my Wizard of Oz moment, where like the mighty Oz was exposed for in all his ineffectiveness. Like I had, like every girl growing up in the United States, been conditioned to believe that adults existed to protect children, and in particular male adults, right? That male adults are paternalistic, and that they exist to care not just for children, but in particular girl children. Yet here was this man who was witnessing a sexual assault happening in the first row of his classroom, and he didn't have the decency to interrupt it or to intervene. And he showed me his shame because he turned deep red. And in that moment, as a 12-year-old, I understood power. I understood hierarchy. I understood my place in the US hierarchy, and I understood my place at the margin of various intersections, because this white man who I had been conditioned to believe was my savior rejected me because he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed that he saw what was happening. And he had created that environment. He had made me vulnerable. He created the danger in that room.
Yeah, it's powerful. What are you working on now that either extends or continues to play with these incidents, your life experience? What are you doing?
Right now I'm working on an essay collection that's largely cultural critique. I am, for example, working on a piece about William Burroughs.
Mm.
And in particular, or well, my essay particularly focuses on Queer, his semi-autobiographical novel set in Mexico. And I'm writing about Mexico through the white gaze, literally, G-A-Z-E, but also G-A-Y-S, because we're talking about Burroughs, and the misogyny that he perpetrated there and the femicide that he perpetrated there, because that was where he murdered his wife.
Right.
And I'm going to frame sort of that act within, like, I'm going to sort of unpack that act as it relates to femicide throughout the Americas. So that's the kind of, those are the kinds of works that are going to be included in the essay collection.
Oh, that's wonderful. Who else is writing about issues of sexuality that really resonate with you? Can you recommend another writer?
Yeah. I just got a copy of Brontez Purnell's Galley for a novel that he released. I'm trying to remember the title. It has a great title. It's something like 10,000 Boyfriends or 5,000 Boyfriends. It is sort of like a the novel is a resume of like sexual experience and sexual pleasure. Mm-hmm. And it centers queer sexual pleasure and Black pleasure. And so I'm really excited to be diving into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What's difficult about writing about sex? Which is a crazy question because it must be difficult to write about painful sexual experiences, but tell me, what do you think?
I think that for me, I mean, I tend not to write about sex in a way, I tend not to write about it in a way that is intended for like erotic consumption. Mm-hmm. I tend to write about it as like incidental to a larger story. And I write quite a bit about sexual violence because I have been targeted for so much sexual violence across my lifespan. And so frequently, women are allotted a quota. They can tell a story of sexual violence. But most women's lives are composed of acts across the lifespan, right? We suffer from cradle to grave. We're targeted for sexual violence. And so one of the difficulties, or one of the things that I struggle with when I'm writing about sexual violence, is what to tell and how much to tell. Because part of my project as a writer is pushing and challenging my readers to have compassion for me and to have empathy for me without having to give them pornography. Right. And without having to give them a pornography of pain, and without having to be perfectly virtuous for them. So can I be a bitchy, terrible girl who withholds the pornographic details of an assault from you? Can I be that person and have you still be on my side and have you feel for me? That's sort of the project that I've been engaged in like for over a decade.
Yeah. So it's not just about eliciting sympathy, right?
Yeah.
It's another form of paternalism in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like, can you be my ally? Can you be my accomplice in spite of the fact that you might not like me?
Well, I like you a tremendous amount just based on our discussion and your writing, and the bitchiness is lovely. But I think you're also doing some really interesting work around inviting folks to re-understand the value and even the centrality of anger in people's lives, you know, and that it's okay to be angry. And there are a lot of things about which we should be angry. Yeah,
Yes,
not a problem. So
absolutely. Yes.
definitely. Myriam, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really do appreciate it. I will say I'm a fan. I regularly recommend Mean to folks, and even have a graduate student who's been writing about it, and she will be tickled unbelievably that we had a chance to chat. So I do appreciate you. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.